Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Get Lit Festival. If you didn't know, you are taking part in the Get Lit Festival right now, along with being at a Northwest Passages event. I'm Kate Peterson, Director of Get Lit Programs, and I'm so very excited to be collaborating with Christy and Rob and the whole team at the Spokesman-Review's Northwest Passages. Can we get a big round of applause for Northwest Passages and Spokesman-Review? At Get Lit, we celebrate the power of the written word. And so celebrating the power of local journalism by partnering with the Spokesman-Review is something we're very proud to be doing this year. Northwest Passages does such an amazing job with all of their events and presents fascinating and inspiring conversations with writers in our region. And we're so lucky tonight to be featuring two Northwest literary legends, our very own Jess Walter and Portland's own Willy Vlautin. Special thanks to Jess Walter for being such a great supporter of Get Lit over the last 28 years and for helping to make tonight's event possible. So again, in addition to being here for Northwest Passages, you are here for Get Lit, so I just want to tell you a little bit about us. Get Lit is a nonprofit organization housed within Eastern Washington University, and for the last 28 years, every April we present a dynamic and diverse lineup of over 40 free and low-cost literary events, which of course means readings, onstage conversations, open mics, craft classes, a full book fair, and much more. This year's festival features over 30 events with over 50 authors from our region and beyond. Our mission is to inspire creativity, celebrate diversity, and showcase the power of the written word. Get Lit has been bringing the literary community together since 1998, and there have been some really amazing writers on our stages, including Kurt Vonnegut, Dennis Johnson, David Sedaris, Tess Gallagher, Marilyn Robinson, Robert Bly, Rita Dove, Anthony Doerr, Colson Whitehead, Salman Rushdie, Bell Hooks, Anne Lamott, Hanif Abdurraqib, Kaveh Akbar, Ada Limon, Roxanne Gay, Chen Chen, Carmen Maria Machado, and many, many others. Thanks. This is actually the 10th festival that I have planned as director, and I just wanted to say how much Get Lit means to me and how much I have enjoyed getting to create this little oasis of literary joy every April. A writer told me a few years ago that Get Lit felt like a festival designed specifically for writers, rather than maybe a more traditional book festival that might focus a little bit more on readers, who we also, of course, love. But we really try to cater to the writer's soul at Get Lit. And to me, that means things like conversations over free Doma coffee, opportunities to sit quietly together and read, sometimes with adoptable animals, sometimes in historic and hopefully haunted buildings, and also bringing together artists from different mediums like visual art, culinary art, and even the art of creating cocktails inspired by festival authors. It's been a dream to be able to put writers on stage together and to see this amazing community show up for the last 10 years and for the last 28 years. So thank you for always showing up, Spokane. One big round of applause for you. And I don't want to take too much more time away from tonight's conversation, but I do want to say just a quick thank you to some of Get Lit's sponsors, including Spokane Arts for the Saga grant that helped us present so many free events today, and also Eastern's College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences and the Marketing and Communications Department for their support. I'd also like to thank Assistant Coordinator Mackenzie Draper, Student Assistant Adam Westerholm, and all of the MFA students and community members who volunteered their time this weekend to make the festival happen. We still have a full day of virtual programming tomorrow that premieres on our YouTube channel, and last night's live stream with the most amazing memoirists will also be available on YouTube very soon if you missed it, so we hope that you'll tune in for those. And if you're an author who would like to be part of next year's festival, we are open for submissions from May 1st to September 1st, and you can find more information at getlitfestival.org. Okay, that is all for me. Thank you again for being here for this amazing collaboration with Jess Walter and Willy Vlautin. And now I'd like to introduce the one and only Rob Curley from the Spokesman-Review. Thank you.
So 8 years ago, we asked if we could be a part of this, and they said no. So thank you. Thanks. We're glad to be back. Look, I love being here. I mean, I don't know if you've realized this. I'm the only editor in America whose first name is a verb and whose last name is an adverb. So adjective too. Northwest Passages is one of my pride and joys. I loved it, and this is so exciting because the only thing I love as much as I love words is music, and Willy does all of that. So today's going to be a blast. And if you want to know how this happened, every year we're lucky enough to host the very first the opening of Craig Johnson's book tours. And the last one he was at, he goes, "Is there anyone you would want?" And we mentioned Will, and he goes, "Here, let me get you a cell." When we called him, he was like, "Who dis?" So what's cool about this, though, is that Craig, so that you know, newspapers around the country have asked if we would help them do this. And so we've been doing that. And the first author who said that he would do it is Craig Johnson, who had literally went with me around. So this is us in Charleston, which was really fun because they drink moonshine on stage. It was awesome. Can you imagine Liquor and Me? So it was fantastic. But you know, I'm not really going to tell the stories I normally tell. I want to get to this tonight. And you know, on stage tonight, we have our sports editor's brother. Right. I don't know if Ralph is here, but Ralph will tell you that this is the second best writer in the family. You know, we try to do a big job with these videos, and I can't wait till you see this next one we've done. It's a humdinger.
She fell asleep to the clanging and woke up outside Calamity Falls. The two hobo kids were blue and her pony boy with a needle in his arm.
Whether it's music or novels, Willy Vlautin is a storyteller.
Yeah, I mean, writing a novel can be maddening, and your own limitations are maddening, and I always try to write about things that kind of throw me into a ditch mentally anyway. So yeah, it's difficult, but I like the puzzle of it, and I like the work ethic of it.
Vlautin has been creating stories since he was 11 years old.
I always think of my novels and my songs living in the same apartment building, and they just run into each other all the time.
It would be a crowded apartment building. Vlautin is the author of 8 novels, the most recent, The Left and the Lucky, being released right in time for Get Lit. And Vlautin is also the founder of the bands Richmond-Fontaine, who released 11 albums, and the Delines just released their 5th album, The Setup.
But I never wanted to be like in a band in front of people, but I wanted to be in a band that drove around and played gigs and like was a part of it. And then with the books, it was the same thing. I started waking up going, God, what if your book was next to all the other books in the library or in the bookstore, and you went in and your book's not alone? Then you start, that's what got me. Super fandom got me more than anything else.
Vlautin has his own super fans and other authors, Jess Walter among them, and we are so glad to have them both on stage tonight. Please welcome them both to the Get Lit Northwest Passages stage.
Welcome. Thanks so much for coming, Willy. Now, I know you came to Spokane to play music.
Years ago, my band Richmond-Fontaine, we played her like 3 times in the course of like a year and a half, and I can't remember where, because it was back when we all slept in the same motel room, and the only way we stayed together was we just drank a lot. So I don't remember much about it except I was in love with the Davenport, because I've always had, my escape dreams have always been that I'm wearing a suit and rich and live in a hotel, and I thought, you know, the Davenport might be the place for me. Luckily, or unluckily, I haven't ditched my life so far, and I don't have the money to live at the Davenport.
And I'm guessing touring bands, that wasn't quite the place you guys stayed, the Davenport.
No, I mean, back in the day, we were like a Super 8 band. And, but when we first got to have one hotel room, it was great, because you didn't have to stay at some like some weird bartender's buddy's house.
right.
And we'd stay at a house. One night we stayed at a place where the guy goes, "Follow me in my car." And so we drive. It was in Kansas City, and we pull up this house. And he goes, "Go in that house. You can stay there." And we're like, so he unlocks the door, and we go inside, and there's nothing in the house. There's no furniture or anything. He goes, "Oh, well, we've sold it, but they don't take ownership for like a week. So you guys just stay here." And we're like in a weird part, not a great part of town, I guess I'd say. And then there was a stack of, literally 2 foot tall stack of foot fetish magazines. Now, I ain't a prude, but I didn't know they had foot fetish magazines. And I was like, "Do we really stay?" So that was one of those nights where I was like, "Well, let's all stay in the back room and barricade ourselves in."
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I got over that pretty quick.
I think I had a piece in that magazine. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, sure.
So this is your 8th book. What's the difference touring as an author versus touring as a musician?
Well, the thing with me is I like being a cog. I like being a small cog in the machine. So in a band, you're like, I don't want to be late to the van. Yeah. I want to be on time. I don't want to be the worst musician on the stage. So if one of your guys in your band starts drinking early, you're like, "Well, I'm not going to be the worst tonight." and I like that. The book stuff is just lonelier. I've had my punk rock degenerate friends that I used to hire to go with me just to be my buddies, and they're all like, "Oh no, I'm too tired." They don't want to drive around with me. But you do get a nicer hotel room, though. I gotta say that.
When people would ask me what it's like being on book tour, I would often say it's like being in the world's worst band, because you schlep your own luggage.
Yeah.
You hope 20 people show up, and
that's true.
So this novel, The Left and the Lucky, first of all, I love it. You guys are in for an amazing treat. But let's talk about just its roots, where it comes from. Eddie, the main character, is a house painter in Portland.
Well, it started with the idea of, I wanted to save somebody. I think, as you get older, you realize you can't save anybody.
Yeah.
And I started thinking, there was that in me that I was like, "You're not going to write about that." And then I was reading Primo Levi a lot. And he has a quote that says something to the effect, because if I try to do it exactly, I'll mess it up. But it says, like, you don't know who has the inner strength to overcome extreme hardships, mental anguish, physical hardships. You just don't know who's got the true grit, like Charles Portis says, and who doesn't. And I got obsessed with that idea. And the idea, like, if you lined 5 people up in a row, you lined up a Green Beret sniper, a yoga instructor that's never had a drink in her life, an emphysema-ridden old lady, a little kid like Russell, and like just a working-class tough guy. If it might be the emphysema old lady that's got that true grit, that can overcome everything, or you can really put her in a tough situation and she'll navigate her way out. So I thought about that a lot in terms of 2 brothers, one who's 8 and really small for his age, still wets the bed, can't make friends.
And that's Russell.
And that's Russell.
Yeah.
And then his older brother is Curtis, who's 15. He's good looking. He has friends, but he's full of rage. And I started thinking about those 2 living in a world that's noir, like it's very black and white. A world that's full of, like a noir movie, shadows and fear and darkness, because they live in a really rough family life. And I was wondering how those 2 would handle the falling apart of their family. And then right next door lives a house painter, a 42-year-old guy whose wife just left him. And he's got like a misfit, degenerate crew of house painters. And the little boy starts sneaking over to his yard and hanging out because it's safe there. Yeah. And these crew of guys are really funny, and they like the kid. And Eddie, where the lucky part comes in, is Eddie is a guy that, because you'll find out later in the book, because of what happened to his sister, he can't help but take in strays. He can't say no to the misfit.
Yeah.
And so this kid shows up into the perfect situation, Technicolor, old school, widescreen Technicolor. And so I was really interested in that. And then, you spend 4 years trying to save the bad novel you wrote,
Yes, yeah. Is that approach different than the other 7 novels? I mean, the milieu seems the same, the working class, rough neighborhood, but it does feel like that question, can they save each other, sort of hovers over this novel the whole way. And I love the way that creates suspense. It's a different kind of suspense. It's not who committed the murder. In some ways, it's far more vital than that. It's, can these people save each other? Can they pull each other out?
Yeah, I've never been interested in, I was addicted to Law and Order and cop shows and all that, but I've never wanted to write like that.
Yeah.
I've always believed in the decency of people. I mean, we get so obsessed with the violence of people and the darkness of people, but majority of us have good neighbors, and most of our family would bail us out if we needed. Now, you might not like them, but they would probably bail you out. So I've always been interested in kind of broken people navigating tough situations but not giving up. And I think I started writing that just because I needed to write about people like what I was going through or my family was going through, and that they made it.
Yeah.
And sometimes they make it and sometimes they don't in my books, but I always really want them to make it.
Yeah, That since this is a Get Lit event too, I kind of want to ask that process question. Did you know the ending? Did you have a pretty good sense for where these people would end up, or were you living in that suspense as you were writing it?
I mean, we were talking about earlier about like how you juggle like working a straight job for years and writing when everybody thinks you're nuts for writing. Yeah. Now you've been really successful young, but I was closet writer from say 18 to 35, and so like your girlfriend might go, well, so you'd rather sit in a room by yourself on a Friday night, and you're like, but I finally have energy. Like my work wasn't too hard tonight or whatever, so I'll just write. I'll just be in the room over there, and she'll get better. So you like writing more than you like me, and you're like, oh no. Yeah. So
maybe a little.
Yeah. Sadly, maybe a lot.
Yeah.
But so I learned very early that if I didn't know the beginning, the middle, and the end, that it was a quagmire, and I didn't have time for quagmires. Because I would write myself into like a friend of, he's now a friend of mine, but he was a big hero of mine named Barry Gifford. Mm-hmm. And he's a brilliant writer. And I was reading some interview, and he said, I just let the characters walk through the door and see what happens. And so I would try that, and every time I tried that, I'd go, but after 200 pages, I don't know what door to go to next. Yeah, right. So over a cup of coffee, I can tell you the beginning, the middle, and the end. Because I have to know the end, because then it's the goal. Then you're like, okay, I have to sacrifice all this time to get to the end, but I know the end, so I just have to work hard to get the end. But how about you? Because we were talking today that you're not like that.
A little bit. I mean, at some point I do have to know the end, but I do like to sort of riff and let it run like that. I remember reading that, those quotes about people letting the characters act on their own, and I thought you sort of had to do that for a while, and so I would just create these characters and wait for them to act, and they would just sit around and drink beer, and and so eventually, you have to add some order to it. But I like to have some kind of I like to have the voice first. I guess I like to have the sound of it before I start thinking maybe what will happen, and then I like to leave some surprises open for myself. Do those endings go where you expect them to?
You're right. Like I like a lot of surprises in the middle.
Yeah.
But I guess when I start, I feel like every novel of mine, I want it dipped into the feel of a song. Yeah. So I want like if it's to make you hurt, I want it to hurt like a sad ballad.
Sure.
And so I think about the whole feel of the book. By the end, all I want you to do is feel like when you hear a really sad song not a depressing song, but the melancholy song that makes you just want to pull over the side of the road and like cry a little bit, or like, oh, I wish my life was this and that. Like those inspirational melancholy, like I want to leave my job and leave my home and become the real me.
Yeah,
you know?
I have to say you pull that off, and you especially pull that off with this book. My daughter was reading it and texted me, "That dog better be okay." Like, early
that's one thing I've learned, man. You can kill
as many people as you want.
You can kill 10,000 people a page.
Yeah.
But like a dog hurts his paw, and they're like, some guys wanting to hang you.
They call the SPCA on you. Yeah. So I want to talk about that 18 to 35 year period when you were deciding you wanted to be a writer, and you were angering every girlfriend in the cities you lived in. What were you reading? What was pushing you toward being a writer? Are there influences that you can look back on that are especially important?
I mean, I think why I started writing songs at 11 because my brother was 4 years older, so he was a 15-year-old guy writing to get girls.
Yeah.
My brother was a serious ladies' man. He had like a...
Mine too.
And he had... There you go. I mean, my brother had a hot tub. Not a hot tub. He had a water bed. I'm exaggerating. But he had a water bed and then a mural of aspen trees by his bed. And he had a stereo that could literally make our house shake. And so I did everything he did because he was kind of my father figure. Yeah. And so he wrote songs, but he always wrote songs to get girls. And I had a hard time as a kid. And he said, you should write songs about the way you're feeling. And so I wrote really dark folk songs from age 11. Like, it's like I've read some of that stuff, and you're like, God, I should have been committed, you know? But, you know, when you're really bad musician, bad voice, and I'm not being self-deprecating, I had no talent. I was just one of those guys that bought into it more. Like, I loved rock and roll more, and I believed in the power of disappearing into a song. Like, songs saved my life. Yeah. They were like my best friends. And so I started playing songs, and I realized I upset everybody around me because I was so bad at it. And I lived in the basement. My mom lived right above me, and she went to bed at 8, woke up at 5:30, worked 5.5 days a week, and she'd be like, do you have to play after 8? You know? Yeah. And then she'd be really nice, and then she'd start stomping. And then you're a kid, and so you quit for a little bit, and then you start up a little bit, and then you start getting louder and louder. And then she starts yelling at you, and it unravels from there. And then every band I was in, your neighbors are complaining, or you start playing bars at like 17, 18, and the bar's like, I thought you said people were going to show up. And, or they say, you know, or I opened up for a Jimmy Buffett impersonator. And the guy goes, if one person, I mean, he was such a bad guy. We were playing a Mexican restaurant in Reno, Nevada, and he says, if one person leaves, I'm gonna grab you off, and you're never gonna play in this town again, kind of thing. And you're like 17, like shaking. Yeah. And then one day at 18, I went into the library and started writing a story. And I was like, wow, nobody yells at you writing a story. Yeah. And it's the work of a song, but it's private. Yeah. And you can fail in private. You can write bad story after bad story. And so during that time, I mean, I grew up influenced heavily by Steinbeck, I think, because I was taught 6 of his novels in high school. Wow. And yeah, Steinbeck was king for whatever reason from when I was in 8th grade to senior in high school. And I related to him because I live with a struggling single mother. And I related to him because I felt like a misfit. And I related to him because I wanted to hang out with Doc from Cannery Row. I wanted to hang out with these cool guys that would take care of me, because that wasn't my situation. So there was a romance and a sadness of him I liked. And then, you know, I took a night class at the university, and I read Larry Brown, Flannery O'Connor. And she was so good that it made me quit for a while, because you're like, whoa, like that lady's really good. Yeah. And
I think it was the Catholicism.
Maybe it was. She was. Yeah, it scared me probably.
Yes, right. Yeah.
And then I went to a bookstore one day at 22, and they had a display of the Black Lizard press had the display of like a a cowboy that just got out of a mental ward, holding a gun, looking crazy, and in his chest were books by Jim Thompson, David Goodis, Charles Williford, and they were 130-page books, and they had like noir women on the front or crazed maniacs on the front, and I was like, I bought like 6 of them. And that changed my life too, because they kept me up at night. They were working class stories by people hanging by a thread, and that's what really got me is the guys hanging by a thread. It really moved me and saved my life, really. What about you?
Exact same story, brother's waterbed. I mean, I think every kid who becomes a writer finds his way or her way into a library at some point. And that refuge, that place full of ideas, and the minute you start to imagine that one of your books could slide in there is the most remarkable thing. And
that took me a lot of years.
Did it? So you weren't imagining when you were reading those books that and writing those stories?
Oh no, I didn't think I was smart enough. I'd never done anything. I thought you had to be like James Bond. You had to do something. You had to go to war. You had to be this really smart guy that did amazing things, and I was just kind of a mediocre guy living with a depressive mother and a super cool brother, and I just I always had a big edge to me. I was always like, I was a little rattled, and I think I started writing for escapism, and I started realizing that my stories as 18, 19 were really dark, and I had no idea. Like, I wasn't the smartest guy either, and I was like, whoa, that guy just died. And I go, well, you made him die. And I'm like, but why? And so I was scared. And then I just read a ton. I read, we talked about William Kennedy. The great William Kennedy really made a lot of
cycle.
So you just keep trying to find books that make you feel comfortable. For me, I had no intention of publishing until one of my bands started doing better at 35, and the guy asked me, I was doing interviews a lot, and the interviewers were usually novelists. They wrote rock interviews on the side. And then the guy goes, I bet you write novels. And I'd written like 4 by then.
Really?
And then he goes, I'll introduce you to my agent. And that's the only reason. And then I went home and had that crisis of like, well, they could be sitting in the library. You could see it at Goodwill next to all the other Goodwill books. And you're like...
That connection between music is one of the things I told you I want to talk about. And we're going to play just a little bit of a couple of songs. We're going to play the first one now. And I want you to listen to the lyrics because they remind me so much of the storytelling here, of Raymond Carver, of Dennis Johnson, of that sort of gritty, working class, underachiever style. So we're going to hear just a little bit of a song. love that. If I was teaching a writing class, I would say start your story with Little Earl driving down the Gulf Coast, sitting on a pillow, and the detail that gets to me are the 2 lighters for souvenirs. I'm a big fan of the Delines. That's Willy's new band after Richmond Fontaine. Talk about that process of writing songs versus writing stories, how they connect. I mean, I guess we think of country western songs often as having those great stories. Bob Dylan, and Hurricane, tells you an entire story. But it's pretty unusual. And have you always written songs like that work as stories?
Yeah, I mean, I think before I was 18, I was trying to write catchy one-liners. I was obsessed with that band X, like the world's message in my kiss.
Yeah, we have an X fan out there.
The phone's off the hook, but you're not. Those kind of great one-liners, and I'd literally stay up all night trying to come up with them. Yeah, and I could never do it. And then when I was 18 and started writing stories in the library, I started realizing, like, oh no, my way is going to be telling folk songs, because those were the story songs saved my life, because you could disappear from who you are. Yeah. You could listen to a Bob Dylan song, or those Springsteen, Tom Waits kind of guys, Ricky Lee Jones, that would tell stories, and then suddenly you're not in your house anymore. You're a million miles away. Yeah. And so that was always my goal. So when I started writing like that, I was obsessed with where I grew up, Reno, Nevada. I was madly in love with that city for a lot of years. Yeah. And so I said, well, it's all about the grift. Yeah. It's all about the details. So there's always got to be one detail in a story that sucks you in, that you're like, oh, I buy it. Yeah. And so I was like, well, I might not be the smartest guy, but if I come up with the right detail that when you listen to it, you forget that it's a guy like Amy singing. Yeah. You're just like, oh, I'm with Little Earl now. Yes. And so I would work on that stuff forever. So Little Earl at one time was a 56-year-old grifter with a row of suits in the back seat. Yeah, for about 6 months. That song was that. And then that turned into a song of mine called Can You Get Me Out of Phoenix? Yeah. But then Little Earl became what it is, which is, I often write about brothers, and this is the 2 brothers that they live with their uncle who works on an oil rig, and the uncle just says, don't drive my car, don't get in trouble, because you guys live alone a lot, and I'm your guy. Right. And so they're
in trouble.
And they're in trouble. They just grab a bunch of stuff out of a mini mart and run for the door, and the mini mart owner shoots one of the kids. Yeah. And the brother's in the back, and he's too scared to go to the hospital to admit what he's done. Yeah. And the little brother's driving, and he doesn't know what to do. Yeah. So it's all about, like, what would they steal? The pizzas,
and that affinity for, for people that others might look down upon or walk right past or see as lowlifes or something. Do you think that comes from growing up in Reno? That's a tougher city. Have you always had that kind of empathy for the working class and the painters and the Russells of the world?
I mean, I have, for a couple of reasons. One, my mom worked with all men, and she worked with a lot of guys that her boss would find off the river. Kind of like here, like the truckies, like Reno's like the kind of cute little sister of Spokane. I mean, they both are along the river. They both have some really cool things about them. They both, like the nature around them is gorgeous. Spokane's like one of the great cities, I think.
It is, Here.
But she worked with these guys that her boss would try to rehabilitate, and then they'd keep it together, and then they wouldn't keep it together, and then my mom would go, I saw Steve by the river again, and he might have lasted 6 years working, but my mom was an oversharer, I think, and so I knew, and we were a small family, and she said, look, you're in America, you're 3 bad moves from living in your car, so don't mess up. Wow. And I had a big edge on me then, and I thought I would be, in Reno at that time, there was like just drifter men. All these kind of wayward guys about our age. Lived in...
Late 30s?
Yeah. Well, they lived in the motels, because when I was growing up, within a mile radius of downtown, there was over 100 mom and pop motels. Yeah. That no tourists would stay at them. The tourists all stayed at the casino, the safe casino hotels. So the mom and pops had to figure out how to survive, and so they'd rent to like a lot of failed men, some women, but not as much as you would think back in the day. And then later on, now it's families, and it's more severe. But so I grew up seeing a lot of like men that are just like deer in the headlights, old middle-aged guys, and I assumed I would be like that. I just was like, oh, I'm gonna end up like that, so I better get used to it. So I was both obsessed with seeing what it would be like, and then when I'm about 30, I'm like, I don't want to be one of those guys. Then you spend your whole rest of your life trying to run as hard as you can and away from that way of living. So I think that just got in my DNA, I think, and I've always been interested. And sadly, I've never been much, so I've never been able to write about being a lawyer or living in New York City or flying a plane. I've never gotten to the stage where I have a jet. Jess.
Yeah. You've got plenty of time.
Thank you.
You're in
That's
your late,
I was fishing for that.
You're in your late 30s. There's so much
but
time.
But you have a lot more. It seems like, I don't know if it's curiosity or courage to write different styles. But the thing I've always loved about you is because you do write about the working class. You're not as dark-minded as me. So it's more fun to read, sadly.
No, that's not true.
But why is that side of life?
Yeah, I think the same thing. I'm a first-generation college student. My dad worked at an aluminum plant. I've always lived about a solid 8-iron from the river and the railroad tracks. Never lived on the South Hill, and so those are just the worlds that I knew. And then I think the drama feels more intense for that same reason. Eddie and Russell, their lives are hanging by that thread, And for those of you who want to read more about Reno, Willy's last book, The Horse, is about a Reno musician, and I thought that was just beautifully captured, just both the hard life of a musician, but also the city in that time too.
Yeah, I've always, the one thing I learned from writing. Just for yourself and not, I never thought anything would come of them. Is you're like, well, if I'm going to spend day after day after day in a room writing a story, it's going to be about the places I love. Yeah. So I end up in the restaurants. My guys are always in the restaurants that I want to eat at, or flirting with the waitress I want to flirt with. Yeah. And
this book is like the opposite of the Michelin Guide to Eating in Portland. If you want to know every diner, it's perfect that way. Well, we're going to get some audience questions, but first I want to play one more song, which I don't know how Willy did it, but he somehow wrote about my family Christmas. So we're going to play just a little bit more of one song, which is one of my favorites, Christmas in Atlantis.
Can't believe you're playing.
Taxi, hearing Little Drummer Boy. We're half tight and dressed to the nines when we open up the door. First thing we see is your uncle in his tighty whities, screaming at the TV because the Broncos are losing and won't even make the spread. Kitchen is the beer and the hors d'oeuvres and the gin fizz. And your mom's still hitting on my dad, but now my mom wants to join in. Your nephew is in the basement playing Grand Theft Auto on Christmas Day, and your niece starts showing me pictures of her naked in that triple X way. Says there's no point in college with all the money she makes. Just put a down payment on a 5-year-old Hyundai with 180,000 miles and needs new brakes. Oh, let's go, let's go, let's get
By the time the uncle starts talking about the good attributes of the KKK, I'm like, this is the greatest Christmas song ever. So,
Yeah, you know, and I've had people come up to me and go, "Why are you so down on Christmas?" And I'm like, I go, "You didn't think that was funny?"
my family loves when I put that song on at Christmas.
Oh, good. Yeah,
so
you gotta.
you should all search it out. Well, I think we're gonna get some audience questions now.
I'll start over here, move over there, and if somebody waves their hand up there, I will go up to the second floor. But I want to make sure that, oh, right in the front, that's great. You're the first one to have a question, but we'll start here and I'll move my way up. Dun, 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 right here.
Okay, so how did you end up in Portland? But even more so, how did you end up being a painter?
I moved to Portland. Well, you know, my mom was really conservative, and Reno's a kind of a small town for if you grow up there. And I was a failed musician. I worked at a trucking company loading trucks, and my mom she didn't like the arts, and it's hard to be a failed loser musician, wannabe writer in a town where you don't do good at it, and your mom's staring at you all the time going, "What are you doing with your life?" And this band from Portland came through and played this little bar, and they were miles better than any band I'd seen, like a small-time band. And the guy goes, "You should move to Portland. They've got, you know, cheap houses at the time and basements, so you can practice in the basement. And there's bars to play at." And I transferred from that trucking company. I had a place in Portland. I transferred up there. And then I spent 7 or 8 years quitting jobs all the time to go on tours where I make no money. Or I used to quit jobs to write novels that I would never show anybody. You know, I wasn't the smartest guy. And then I'd get day labor, like working in warehouses, and then you get all, you know, I'd be very dramatic, like, "I don't think I can do this anymore, man. Maybe I'll just like live by the river and just give up." And then my buddy goes, "Why don't you paint houses with me, and then you don't have to quit anymore. When you go on the road, you just don't work for me, and then you come back and you work for me." And then, I mean, I met my wife through him. He helped me get a home loan. And then he started me in my own business. So then I started my own business, and I'd say, "Oh, you know, I can't start your job for 3 weeks because I'm starting this other big job, and really I'd just be going on the road." So I never liked painting. I liked hanging out with all the weirdo painters I worked with, but you know, I wasn't like I had to convince myself every day to go to work. It was a big battle every day. "You can do it." "No, I can't." "You can do it." "No, I can't." So that's how I started painting.
I made it up here to the rafter, and another question here.
Wow, look at you.
So you talked about writing, even though in your head, writers have to be this special, kind of smart type of person. When you feel like you're not that person, what makes the story come to you anyway?
I think part of it was, you know, I was a huge fan, and once in a while you'd go, "Well, why can't I see a story about 2 brothers in Reno?" You know, you'd get these, like, you wouldn't find the exact story you wanted, and I just disappeared. It took years to create like the writing was a kind of a safe place for me. So I stopped caring if I was good or bad at it. And I was a good boss to myself. I wasn't like, "You're not that good at it." I was more like, "Hey man, you don't have to be good at it. You just have to get over that wall one time. You can hit your head against it for, you know, 1,000 times, but nobody knows it." And so I was nice to myself, I think, and I wrote about things I really cared about and loved. So my brother and I once got in a fight, and I felt so ashamed because my brother's so cool that I wrote a novel where 2 brothers never fought no matter what, and that was my first novel, The Motel Life. So I did that. I tried to break up with horse racing because I love horses so much, and I had a huge crush on this jockey that kept getting hurt, and I was worried about her, and so I wrote that book for that. So I'd have these big reasons to write, like I'd have these big things I was trying to figure out, or or stand up for in my own way. So that kind of got me through the self-confidence thing. Self-confidence has always been the hardest thing for me, and it's just that, like, you have to work really hard if you beat yourself up like that, or, you know.
I feel like it comes and goes for all writers, self-confidence. Yeah. I used to go to the bookstore and look for a terrible book. I would just read the beginnings, and I'm like, well, I can write better than that.
Yeah,
you know, and I always thought you get great inspiration from the books you love, and you get a weirder, darker inspiration from that bestseller that's really horrible.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. You're right. You have to do a lot of delusional self-help for yourself to keep going. You're right. And then you have to read really good books that somehow inspire you, not the really good ones that make you go, Jesus, man, I'm a janitor in this school of writers.
Yeah. But that idea of writing the story that you can tell, you know, which is what Toni Morrison says. She says, I started writing because no one was writing the books I wanted to read. And I love that answer.
Yeah, and like being in love with things, that's the only thing you have is like the things that you think are important. Yeah, and that gives you the courage. You're right. That
and crappy books.
Yeah.
Another one up here in the second row.
So just curious, you could say you kind of didn't have a whole lot of faith in your writing. What did it feel like when you found out you're going to be published and, you know, go on sale, your first book?
Well, you know, it was a fluke. The whole thing was a fluke. I mean, because, like I said, my band was we were on the upswing. And at the same time that we were on the upswing, I played a gig where this agent was there. She was 25. She just started, and she was really drunk. And she says, one of her writers was a crime writer, and goes, he says I should read, just send me your book. And then she read the book and liked it, and goes, I know a guy that's supposed to buy a book about like an Americana kind of book right now. So let me see if I can sell it to him. I mean, and he hadn't, you know, the following week he probably had already bought a book that he was supposed to do, like kind of a more West kind of vibe book he was supposed to buy. So that guy bought it, and I was like, you know, after being in failed bands and making people miserable with my music for 20 years, you know, I was really excited, you know, obviously really excited. And then I started calling that 25-year-old kid, and I was like, hey, is that publisher out of business yet? Or is this thing going to really happen? She goes, don't worry, they're not going to go out of business. And then, so I had no idea about any of it, and I really kept thinking they were going to go under before my book came out, and then your book comes out, and you're like, oh shit, now I got to worry if people like it, and that killed me too. And then, you know, you worry about all that stuff. But I got to say, it was really fun. And the first time I did see that book like really beat up in a Goodwill, I literally teared up. And I remember calling my brother when I went to City Lights Books in San Francisco, and my books were there, and I literally, I started literally crying, because you're like, oh my God, City Lights Books, and why did they have my books there? But you're pretty happy they do, you know, and you take a picture of it to make sure. I had the lady behind the counter take a picture of me next to my books, and it had her holding a City Lights thing, so you know.
So Willy, I noticed in this novel, food plays a big part. Jess touched on like the restaurants and everything, but I also noticed that like if Russell's eating cold cereal versus pancakes and bacon, it's just a different dynamic. And so I'm just kind of curious about like, you know, and Houston's an ex-chef, and Eddie's cooking, and can you just talk about like how food plays a part in this novel compared to your others?
Yeah, I mean, you know, food is so important, like, especially, like, I think it was Raymond Carver that said, you know, sometimes all you can do is have a second bowl of ice cream not to implode. Like, that's the greatest part of your day. And I really always really related to that growing up. And like, when you're a kid, you knew when your mom's paycheck came in, because my mom was kind of agoraphobic, and so she would pay you to go to the grocery store, meaning she'd let you buy a record, like this grocery store in Reno had records at the grocery store. And so, and she'd only shop once every paycheck, and you could throw whatever you wanted in there because she was out of her mind because she was scared to be in a store, you know? So you're throwing in like ding dongs and you know, me and my brother had this whole routine of stuff that you'd buy, and so you'd get to buy all the good stuff, and then by the end there was nothing. So I got obsessed with that idea. And in this book, his home life, his mom's not much of a cook, and his grandmother's starting to fade, and she can't cook anymore. And then he goes over to Eddie's house, and you know, when I have the kid, Russell, first meet Eddie, he's at the grocery store and he's buying vegetables. And I put a list of the vegetables he buy because I wanted you to know, man, this guy's cool. He cares about what he eats. And so all of a sudden, you know, this really lonely kid is hanging out with like Eddie, who cares about what he eats, and then Houston's a chef, and everything becomes fun that way. Food becomes fun. The comfort of those guys all hanging out together is fun because they're all laughing, and in that way you do when you have miserable jobs, you know.
There's that great poignant moment every night when Russell comes over and Eddie says, "Are you hungry?" And he says, "Are you hungry, Eddie?"
Yeah,
you know,
because he's fishing.
Yeah, because he's starving.
He's starving, and he doesn't know how to cook yet. And so
are you
he's
hungry,
like,
Eddie?
Yeah.
If you are.
Yeah.
Okay, last question.
Hi. No question. You know, your voice is so distinctly American West, and I know some of your music has made a connection in Europe that maybe hasn't connected the same way to U.S. audiences, and I'm curious if your novels have had the same trajectory and what that's like for somebody who is so distinctly Western U.S. working class to kind of make noise over there.
Yeah, my books seem to do all right there. You know, I didn't know. You know, I went to a party how my life kind of changed is we were a touring band, you know, playing, I don't know, 100 nights a year, not a ton of gigs, but we toured quite a bit. And then this guy that was obsessed with English women, who lived in Portland, he was Anglophile, but I want to marry an English woman. And so he was going to move to England, and I saw him at a party, and he goes, "I really like your band." And I go, "Okay." And he goes, "Give me a box of CDs." And I was like, "Well, I only have like 2,000 in my basement." So I gave him a box, and he goes, "I'm going to see if I can get something going for you guys in England." And we're like, "Oh, yeah, whatever, man." And because that happens a lot. Like some weird guy comes up and says, "I'm going to make you famous." And then you're like, "Okay, I'll see you." And then you never see him again. And this guy literally called us. He called me like 2 months later. He goes, "You guys got passports?" And we're like, I was 35. I didn't have a passport. Only one guy, the one guy that was married and had his act together, had a passport. The rest of us were like, passports? And we literally had a 2-day party to get our passports pictures taken because we were so pumped. But we never thought we would, so we never thought we'd get to play. And then he got us gigs over there, and we started doing good. And I had no idea why people would like us there. And you're like, but who cares? It's like Candid Camera. You're like, I know they're going to start making fun of me, but until that day comes, I'm going to hit every country they let me go into. And they treat you really nice in Europe. They treat, you know, like they feed you. And like a friend of mine said, you know, the problem I have being in an American band touring around is every bar you go to, they treat you like a criminal. They're like, "Oh, you're an ex-con." And you're like, "No, man, I'm just in the band playing tonight." And in Europe, they're like, they feed you and they give you a hotel room, and you're like, and they listen to my sad sack ballads. And in the U.S., anytime I was playing a ballad, people would talk, and so you'd always do the cow punk, boom, boom, to get out of that stuff. And in Europe, they do my ballads. And I remember the first time we played in Ireland, and I played like a 7-minute song with no chorus. It was like really sad. It was just a story set to like music. And no one talked. And I was like, holy shit. I think I just died and went to heaven, you know? So I don't know why anything happens, man. I really don't. But like I'm a firm believer of like, if you get into that party, like you're not supposed to be in the party, your goal is not to get kicked out of the party. So I don't care if I have to wash dishes at the party. I don't want to go home, man, you know?
Thank you. And with that, I think we'll kick ourselves out of the party and go sign some books. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Joe.